one's ability to be declarative of a certain thing at any given time needs to be a little bit softened by the fact that the space is just moving at the speed of light. And so gathering the information, you can't sit on that forever. You've got to think of something. You've got to motivate by gut, by heart, and then double check your work.
Hi, I'm Jason Harris, and you're listening to Soul and Science. Fast forward your marketing mind in about 20 minutes. I am honored today to be joined by my good friend and client, Alison Moore, CEO of Comic Relief US. Alison Moore is a media and tech industry veteran who's bridging the worlds of entertainment, social change, storytelling, and fundraising to break the cycles that perpetuate intergenerational poverty. Alison joined Comic Relief US in 2019 to build upon the organization's ambitious mission to drive positive change through entertainment. Under her leadership, Comic Relief US is leveraging its unique blend of humor and entertainment to address complex and entrenched social and economic issues. Since 2015, Comic Relief US has partnered closely with Walgreens, NBC, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on its year-round Red Nose Day campaign to end child poverty. In the past 7 years, Red Nose Day has raised over $275 million and has positively impacted over 30 million children. Today's theme is really from brand building into purpose building. Thanks for joining me, Alison. We'd like an Alison Moore origin story. Were you a born marketer, or did you fall into marketing like a lot of misfits?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to sit and have a chat with you, always, but particularly today. And this topic should be super interesting. I was not a born marketer. You know, you see all these sort of youngins now today, and I totally, in many ways, I respect it, which is, you know, they're like in the marketing club in high school, and then they go to college and they're on the marketing track, and then they're getting all the business and the and then they have a brand minor track or whatever. That was not me. I went to college and did some, a few different things. One of which was I was an art major for a couple of years. And then I ended up with a poli-sci degree and came out wanting to go to work on the Hill, and kind of recognized really too late for somebody that really wanted to do this, that all of my contacts were Republicans based on family contacts. And when I sort of put that together and understood really what you did when you were kind of grunt work on the Hill, I was like, I just don't know if I could actually do that. And I slept on a friend's couch and found a gig at Turner through a friend of a friend. And that at Turner Broadcasting in Atlanta. And that really became my on-ramp to what was media and marketing and all the things that we sort of do today. But I really had no idea about that prior to coming to it.
And then you've worked at Condé Nast, you've worked at HBO, Daily Candy, NBC Universal. So you sort of had a lot of entertainment and media. That's sort of your background, right? Would you say?
Yeah, I would. I mean, you know, the connective tissue to me between all of those places, right? HBO, particularly HBO, Daily Candy. I was at SoundCloud, and it was the intention actually for Condé Nast, although it wasn't the reality. Was that I loved being on the business side of the operational side to support what I think is a purpose-driven initiative. And frankly, all four of those areas, the purpose is around content creators and makers and people who create things, you know? So when you're at HBO, I don't care what you do at HBO, you all know that you're there to support the showrunners and the content creators. And it's really there to kind of elevate that work by whatever it is that you contribute to it, you know? With Daily Candy, it was my editors. NBC Universal is certainly that same idea, but my role on TV Everywhere was a little bit different there. But when I got to SoundCloud, it was around emerging artists. I mean, everything that you do at SoundCloud, no matter what part you support, that's your North Star. And so to me, that was purpose driven. It certainly was not to the scale and the sort of context that I'm in now at this role, but I feel like if I'm going to be doing the work, a piece of work or kind of growing or building something, I need to feel like I'm doing it on behalf of something that feels worthy in that way to me. And then I'm landing in this role, and it's the ultimate point of purpose.
Absolutely. And how would you summarize or explain for people listening what Red Nose Day is? Like, there's Comic Relief, the organization, then there's Red Nose Day, and then I know maybe in the future there'll be more things like Red Nose Day. But can you kind of give us like a Cliff Note version of Comic Relief and Red Nose Day for the listeners?
Sure. So Comic Relief is our organization that in which we our goal is to leverage the power of entertainment for our mission of just world free from poverty. And so we do that through a series of different sort of activations, the largest of which is Red Nose Day. So Red Nose Day is the campaign that we run every year, and we have in the last 6 years here in the US, and we've raised over $275 million to keep children, and it's a child-focused campaign and fund, safe, healthy, educated, and empowered. And what that means is that we activate in the spaces where I would say we turn consumers into donors in a brief moment where we can educate, communicate, and talk about our work and talk about that through this really weirdo device of a red nose and think about that to kind of grab attention, have a moment to think about something outside of oneself, whether you're standing at a Walgreens, you're watching NBC, you're, looking at Twitch, you're looking at YouTube, you're doing something on Instagram or TikTok. You have a moment to think about our mission. We've had a way to kind of communicate that. And then there's a time to donate. So during Red Nose Day runs 365 days a year. You can go to rednoseday.org and donate right now. But we do this main kind of like campaign drive in April and May where we kick off in the Walgreens stores in the top of April, and then it culminates into what is an official Red Nose Day at the end of May. With those dollars, we use those dollars, and our grant making team has identified over 28 grantees that are aligned with the mission of our work, again, against the safe, healthy, educated, and empowered side. So these are large organizations like Save the Children, Covenant House, Boys and Girls Club of America, to smaller organizations like Promundo and Echoing Green and the Malala Fund that we fund. And this is a 50-50 split of those dollars between the US and abroad. And, we sort of keep the accountability of those dollars in partnership with our grantee partners to ensure that the dollars are going to the places that are most sort of moving the needle in the areas of concern. And you think about intergenerational poverty and the systemic issues that have really driven folks to stay within a context of cyclical poverty, generation after generation. How do we get to those sort of programs and that work and support, community level and otherwise, to interrupt those cycles of poverty and sort of start at the root causes of it and work against that, in addition to what are the sort of consequences of poverty. So that, I think Red Nose Day is children. I think of other initiatives that we will be taking on to be child-centered, but really thinking about an intergenerational lens on that as well.
Yeah, that's all. It's amazing to hear you talk about the other problems you're trying to solve because they're all critical and seemingly impossible to solve. But you guys are taking them on and understanding them and making a dent and making a real difference. And when you think about opening the aperture and how Comic Relief in the US right now is Red Nose Day, but then you'll add Sport Relief and you'll keep adding other really problems you're trying to solve. The idea that you can reach more people and make an impact, you can talk to more companies and brands because you're going to attack really challenging, large problems that we face in the US. And there's going to be many companies aligned as you add more things that you're accomplishing and attacking that are aligned with the thing that you're trying to solve. And so it opens up the fundraising aperture much larger because it's not just ending child poverty. That's one thing, but then you can add on, and then the fundraising possibilities are much greater. Is that how you sort of look at it? Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that's been a real challenge for me is to understand that my ability to scale is highly dependent on others' scale. And so I desperately need to be able to partner with brands that have that scale, that have that level of engagement with their consumers, that are looking for that kind of authentic dialogue with their consumers about purpose and motivating people to act, and having it accrue back to their brand. I need that sort of, I need to find those like-minded brands that can commit to the scale and the level of engagement required to have that relationship with the consumer. I mean, this is the big change that's been happening, right? I think it's exciting to see that there are CMOs and brand operators now who are like, it's not enough to just say, hey, with every purchase we donate X, because that's easy. What's the sort of brand value that you're bringing into this conversation with your consumer? What are the things that you're standing for? What's the long-term sort of support you're going to be able to give as a brand, utilizing the sort of hearts and minds of your consumers' interest, and really co-claim moving the needle together, because you're really invested in the work, not just the dollar amount.
There's all these studies that consumers don't really care about too many brands. They'd be happy if a brand went away tomorrow and a new brand solved their same problem. They wouldn't really mind. But something like 53% of consumers will spend money and be brand loyal if the brand aligns with values, if it has something beyond just selling products and services and creating shareholder wealth. To be a brand that is successful and has longevity, you have to have values and then show that you're living your values and doing something beyond we're giving away products, right? Like beyond that. The timing's amazing because you're in the zeitgeist of culture with what you're doing now. On the flip side, because it's catching up, there's so many purpose-driven things to donate to and to raise for, because it's in the mainstream of culture now. So like the competition's more, but the culture is there, and you can connect with, raising money and build and working with brands. So I don't know if I guess the question is, how do you feel about that and your place in that culture?
Based on what we do, I think we occupy a really unique space to kind of come in and partner with brands that are looking to do something and produce something differentiated in terms of an experience, or the ways to engage, be it entertainment driven, be it digital driven, and kind of co-create something and do that. And I think about us as being so creatively led on one end, that we have this real spirit of co-creation, which is very interesting and I think very unique and different from others in the space. That said, we also have the goods to back it up in terms of where those dollars go are really rooted in the right kind of work, with a thesis behind it, with the right kind of partnerships with our grantee partners, just really make inroads along what we're saying we're going to do. Because there's many companies that can say we're purpose driven, but when you follow this sort of investment dollars, it's up and down, and I think that's an opportunity.
I think about your career as, you went from a place of spending a budget to raising a budget.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah. And never having to think, maybe fighting for dollars versus other, shows or areas of spending. Certainly that was the case, but there were dollars there and you had to figure out the most efficient and smart way to spend it. Now you have to, you're like each year you're sort of starting at the bottom of the hill, trying to raise the budget. And has that changed your way of thinking? Or do you think it's similar to, all right, we're going to raise this much money and then spend it? Like, how has that changed the way you handle, your job?
Yeah. Well, let's see. That's been a material thing to kind of change against. And, it's two things. The first thing, it's very similar to being in a startup, I would say, where you've got a finite amount of funds and, you're either benchmarked on your sort of angel funds or your, A round, B round, and you've got kind of what is a line of sight to funding. And this is when this is my favorite term, pre-revenue, right? When an organization is pre-revenue. We are not pre-revenue, but it's that same sort of boundaries, like strict boundaries, because when we raise, for every $100 we raise, we give 85 to 80% away for programs, and then retain a small amount for really operating dollars. And, there are operating dollars that are year to year operating dollars. And then there is what is, your operating cash flow or your sort of net asset level that just maintains a health for the company in the event that something catastrophic happens, so that you can, keep everything rolling, right? And we've been very smart and healthy about that. And I think that's just, running a good, solid organization. The limitations come, to your point, when you want to scale ideas and do things that are out of box, that you need proof of concept, that you feel like you could, if this is terrible because it's so cliche, but if I build it, I think that there will be momentum underneath this, right? I don't have those kind of scale dollars readily within the context of how we operate. And that's why we launched just, at the end of the last year, and I'm really excited about this, a growth and innovation fund where, we're hoping to raise $10 million over the next 3 years that will really help us, incubate new ideas, bring the really ones that are successful to scale, right? So whether it's a sport relief or another comic relief event, or something like a kids relief where we can activate just kids and their parents in something kind of cool and fun and engaging. But those dollars will also allow me to build my grants team so that I can expand the kinds of programs that I support. We're deeply committed to growing new folks, to growing new seats at the table for community-led organizations, because we think that's the right thing to do to actually see the change that we want to see around intergenerational poverty and some of the deep innovative work that those groups are doing. But that takes an entire different amount of administrative support than what we've had in the past, when you just have big organizations to support that have their own infrastructure that requires you to hold more. So all the things that allow us to scale, be it around the campaign, zeitgeist, consumer side, or the programs, the diversification of those programs, how deep can we go around safety and rootlessness and child trafficking to support those programs? It takes cash. And so learning how to do that within the nonprofit sector has been a lesson.
When you think about soul and science, do you rely more on creative ideas or business ideas in your gut, or do you rely more on data for where you're going to pivot and move the business? Do you see, obviously, we all know they're both important. That's the name of this podcast, balancing both. But as a leader, as a CEO, and you've done a lot in your career, what do you think about how those two things work together, and kind of where you lean, one or the other, or maybe you try to balance? How do you look at those two things?
My tendency is to lead by gut and intuition. And I would say that's, heart. But a lot of the gut intuition I have comes from absorbing data beforehand. Do you know what I mean? I read a ton, things that are happening, trends, and that kind of thing. And sometimes it's that sort of ephemeral data that actually starts to influence your gut. That's the path, usually a core gut connection or thought around something that feels intuitive, and then sort of like checking the intuition through data as much as you can, and then making a decision to go.
It's almost like knowledge-based, heart-led, because you're doing this, you've got this information, you're absorbing, and then sort of you let your gut drive your decision, but it's informed.
One's ability to be declarative of a certain thing at any given time it needs to be a little bit softened by the fact that the space is just moving at the speed of light. And so gathering the information, you can't sit on that forever. You've got to think of something. You've got to motivate by gut, by heart, and then double check your work.
Definitely. We're doing some Alison Moore questions now, and then we'll wrap it up. Do you have a role model in your life that impacted you personally or your career?
Okay, I have two answers to that. The first one, my father will always be. He passed away in 2018, but sadly, but he would, if he was sitting here, he'd be like, role model. I wouldn't. He would, and we. I would not say role model in that kind of classic sense of the world, but he was a touchstone for me, in business particularly. And we would sit together and, particularly as a woman and a girl being raised by a father who was like, the expectation was you're going to go out and kind of like make shit happen. Do you know what I mean? It was never like, there was no conditional thing, well, you should, or think about, or whatever. It was like, what do you got? What are we talking about today? And I am grateful and thankful for that. And then the rest of it is like, I don't have, I feel like I've got a composite of people in my kitchen cabinet. You know what I mean? That I feel like, wow, these are people that I look to and I'm like, I sort of anchor myself to. So whether it's Courtney Monroe, my best pal at National Geographic, or Liza Landsman at NEA, or, I've got a whole group of friends and women, particularly at HBO, every place that I've been. Some folks at SoundCloud, Holly, Sonia, Dawn Wilson. I mean, they're just people that I feel like are in my chorus that I keep myself accountable to, because they're just great at what they do, and so I keep my eye open to make sure I'm keeping up with them.
It's a matrix of role models that make up the role model. Is there a favorite quote or mantra or something that you think about that really represents you?
Okay, well, now I'm going to bring in my mother into this, because my mother, when I was young, and I can see this now that I have a daughter who's 16 and like comes in and is very focused, and I get like all the details of everything that's going on in the day, right? So here's what happened, here's what I thought about this, but it's like barely a breath in between what it ends up being like a 3-hour soliloquy. I was exactly like that, even more verbose, if anyone can imagine this after listening to me yammer on here. And my mother used to say, oh my gosh, you're just analyzing everything. She'd say, the unexamined life is not worth living. She said, that is your mantra. And when I was a kid, and I was like, fine, whatever. It is totally true. Mama was right. And so Socrates.
That is, I mean, I think that sums you up. Having knowing you a little bit, I think that sums you up really perfectly. It's like interrogate everything. I love that, and in a good way. And I think that that's great. Well, listen, you, Alison Moore, you're amazing. You're whip smart. You kick ass. You're a great client. You're a soulful person. You're doing great things. You're going to do a lot more great things in the back nine. We can't wait to see it. Where can people listening find you and maybe donate money to move everything you're trying to accomplish forward?
Yes. Oh, that's great. So we are at rednoseday.org or comicrelief.org. And that is where you can kind of get a little download about our mission and, what we do and some of the programs that we support and some of the children and the families that we support, and just kind of and participate in some of the fun that we light up around all of our issues. So please, yes, that would be great. Yes,
please do listen and donate. And see what's coming, because it's going to be a big year for Comic Relief. A lot of good stuff on the horizon. All right. Thanks for being on, Alison Moore. It's going to be a great one.
Thank you for having me. This is like such a great thing. I mean, we could have stayed and chatted all day.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, Tyler Nielsen, Emma Swanson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.